Today, on That One Time, I'm joined by Chris Voss.
Chris Voss, retired FBI special agent.
Christopher Voss, a former FBI special agent and hostage negotiator.
With decades of experience in high-stakes negotiations, Chris shares how tactical empathy, effective communication, and mindfulness can transform the way you negotiate in both a personal and professional setting.
There are three basic conflict types: assertive, analyst, accommodator. Each one has skills that are essential and inadequate. There's no data anywhere that suggests that business decisions are made any differently than any other decisions because there's humans that are involved.
It's all really about building trust at the end of the day.
Well, consistency is what builds trust.
I'd love to get an understanding of the difference between, empathy, tactical empathy, and potentially manipulation and negotiation, and how to stay on the empathetic side versus the manipulation side and the downsides of manipulation.
One thing that I never told victim families, when I was coaching them, that I was going to do, we put the terrorists on.
Chris is a former FBI hostage negotiator and the author of the best-selling book, Never Split the Difference, which has sold over 2.5 million copies. I found this conversation extremely insightful because it's packed with practical advice that can make anyone a better negotiator. I think you'll find Chris's approach both fascinating and actionable. If you enjoy this episode, please give us a follow and a rating on Spotify or a like and subscribe on YouTube. We're on a journey to 1,000 subscribers and every bit helps. Hey, Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Adam, happy to be here. Thank you.
Of course. So just want to take a moment and say thank you for being here. I've read your book twice and I've had your negotiating cheat sheet on my wall for about 4 years.
Nice.
And I've looked at it and I've gone, oh, shit. I'm not doing this very well today. Oh, shit. It's actually, wait, I've got it somewhere here. No, I don't know where I put it. But anyway, it's somewhere in the apartment. I brought it with me from Australia when I moved 4 months ago. It was that important to me. I live in New York now. So, yeah, your books turned me into a much more effective and empathetic person. And the lessons that I've learned from the work that you've been doing have fundamentally changed and improved the way I view the world. So, yeah, you're doing amazing work. You should be really proud of yourself. Keep it up. And that's, I appreciate it a lot. So it's really good to have you on here and I'm really looking forward to chatting.
Oh, cool. Thanks. I appreciate that. I'm glad it's helping. It's making a difference.
Of course. So if you could give an elevator pitch of who you are, what you do and how you're contributing to the world, what would it sound like?
Who am I? I'm a deeply flawed person who's increasing collaboration globally, so that I believe that prosperity is a key to peace globally. And the more people make an authentic living with one another, then the more we advance our lives. We put our families in better houses, we put our kids in better colleges. No matter where you are, I don't care if you're in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we as humans have improved our outcomes since the dawn of time through collaboration. We're not very strong. We're somewhat intelligent, but we weren't the most intelligent out there. But our ability to connect and communicate and build teams and work together is, second to none. And you see what's happened with all of that work now.
Yeah, that's why we're the dominant species on the planet. Collaboration.
I'd love to get an understanding of the earlier years of how you got to this point. So what was the pivotal moment early in your career that made you realize that you were on the right path for potentially people that are looking to find the right path and are feeling lost? Like, what was that feeling and how did you know?
Probably when I first started the training to become a hostage negotiator with the FBI at Quantico, it wasn't that far in front of that I've been through some really difficult times professionally with colleagues. I tend to be a very demanding, blunt person, and I'm less so now than I was then. And I had just been through some really difficult times with colleagues that just had difficulty dealing with it. I mean, a high standard of performance, etc. And once I had a colleague saying, dealing with you is like getting hit in the face with a brick. And no matter how right you are, people are going to get tired of getting hit in the face with a brick. So I'd been through some personal challenges. I had my knee reconstructed again. That basically kept me off of SWAT because you can only tear your knee apart so many times. And then finally, it'd probably been a tough, very difficult couple of years. And then I remember when I got to the negotiation training at Quantico, I remember standing in a hallway and really feeling like this is really what I was built for. And the pain of the last 2 years has been worth it.
Mm. Yeah, I understand that feeling. I feel that with the podcast for sure.
Yeah.
It's a
journey, huh?
It's a journey. And I mean, your book is definitely helping me be better at this role. So we'll dig into that later on in the podcast. You made a note about your bluntness and potentially, being difficult to deal with when you were younger.
And I still am occasionally today.
That's okay. We all
my girlfriend Wendy and I joke that I'm her emotional support porcupine.
there's you got to have the harder ones in society to balance it all out. It's all part of the same team, I think. So it's not all that bad. But what changed your bluntness? So what techniques led you to change that, and what have been the positives as you've kind of like potentially softened a little bit, or even just became a bit more tactical with the times that you bring that out as a tool as opposed to the base state?
Well, I think the two things that combine to make me enjoy, thrive, be good at negotiations, be good at negotiation coaching is, I'm a natural born assertive to start with. Now, the three basic conflict types: assertive, analyst, accommodator. Each one has skills that are essential and inadequate. And it's essential that you be assertive in negotiation. And by itself, it's also inadequate. But I also learn. I am coachable. If nothing else, I'm coachable. And so, to see how ineffective blunt assertiveness is. Blunt assertiveness, barefaced, unvarnished assertiveness is, the person on the other side feels like getting hit in the face with a brick. Like, there have been times when I thought I was talking in a natural tone of voice, my natural assertive tone of voice, and people go like, "Hey, you're coming on a little strong here." And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about. What's the matter with you?" I'm not yelling. I'm not angry. The Jim Harbaugh thing. But I've seen the impact that a bad tone of voice has had because it's gotten in the way of some of the outcomes. And I'm coachable. And so in learning that, I stumbled over it on the suicide hotline. I happened to have a good tone of voice on the hotline, and the people that were coaching me were like, "Oh, wow, that was great." And it's the late night FM DJ voice, which I factored into a lot of the training, especially crisis intervention training. And then really post bureau, I've gotten much more aware of the effectiveness of a playful tone of voice and how much more likely people are to make a deal with you if you just sound playful.
Well, I mean, I just instantly laughed.
Yeah. It's a neurological reaction. It's not a psychological reaction. It's a neurological reaction. So I like being successful. I want things that work. And so tone of voice has helped me understand how I've been holding myself back.
You mentioned that there was some examples of, when the tone negatively impacted an outcome. What's an example that comes to mind?
Well, I think in the early days when I ran into problems with colleagues, if I thought they were wasted time, I'd say, "How much time you want to waste?" And that's
Savage.
Blunt and accusatory.
Yeah.
You know, and in hindsight, I could have gone back and I could have said, how much time do you want to waste? And it would have landed completely differently. And I can remember some very specific instances in my early days in the FBI, my first couple of years in New York, when I was just like really direct. Let's get at this now. Stop wasting time. And, you know, would have a negative reaction on people, a residue that just kind of didn't go away.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I've had that issue in the past as well, so I definitely get that on a deeper level. With I wonder if New York having a big, you know, spending a lot of time in New York partially impacted your ability to be more slower and potentially initially more empathetic. Do you think the city had an impact? Because I see this city as a lot of chaos and everyone's moving fast and things have to happen now. And
well, yeah, I mean, I love my time in New York. I mean, I again mentioned my girlfriend. You know, she was born and raised in New York, Wendy, and she thinks that that's one of the reasons we get along so well. You know, she thinks I'm a natural born New Yorker. And New York it goes fast. Because the character of the city is if you want to be the best. I mean, it goes fast because the New York attitude is time is money. Let's be direct. Let's get at this. If you're drawn to New York, you want to be the very best. You see it as the most competitive place on earth, and you want to compete to be the best. And there are different types. Different cities have personalities. And I just became much more aware of this recently. A colleague who's a New Yorker, but he's in LA. And he says, if you're drawn to LA first, you want to be famous. That's not the same, and that's a different breed of cat. And that's not the same as somebody who's drawn to New York to be the best. Or if you're drawn, what are you drawn to if you're drawn to DC? Like, maybe you want to be powerful. Maybe that you draw. You know, those are different attributes. And I love New York because the idea of being a very competitive city, you know, to want to be the best. I'm very, very much drawn to that.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, when I moved here 4 months ago, and I came here 2 years ago for a 4-day holiday, and I just fell in love with the city, and I felt that energy. So I really do get that, and it makes you a better person. You spend time with winners, you become more likely to be a winner.
There's an awful lot to that. Yeah, I would agree.
I want to. You mentioned the FM DJ voice. I'd love to do a bit of an exercise to understand that in a bit more depth and potentially build on that. So, how would we go about doing that?
Well, we don't have to do an exercise. I mean, it's just, in point of fact, it's a neurological reaction. You know, there's a phrase out there: calm is contagious, emotions are contagious. And your downward inflecting voice, and it can't be cold. You know, you got to try to retain a little bit of warmth in it. You also got to be careful that you're not condescending. And
so what's a condescending version of the downward inflection versus a correct version?
Well, calm down.
Yeah, okay.
You know, that would be condescending. You know, the way you would talk to a child. Stop doing that. You know, it's probably a combination of command in there too. Yeah, but there's subtle little things. Like, and then for women, the late night FM DJ voice, what a woman has to be concerned about, the man doesn't. Like, women have a lot of challenges men just do not have. Like, we don't understand as men, like, how much nonsense women have to put up with daily, even from people they like, who they consider to be friends, like the cracks that women have to put up with. And so the struggle with the late night FM DJ voice for women is they want to make sure they don't sound seductive, you know, because, or flirtatious. And, you know, that's an issue. One of my negotiation coaches, Sandy Hine, superstar coach, and she talks about that issue specifically with women. She's actually leading a negotiation two and a half day retreat for women. I think it's in September or October. It's only women attendees. Like, I can't even go. Sandy's running this and she won't let me show up. But one of the things she says is, all right, so for females, drop your chin when you talk. Like, you can use physical overrides to make your voice land properly. In the late night FM DJ voice, even if you don't have a low voice, you could have a high squeaky voice and still downward inflect just by simply dropping your chin. So those are the nuances. It's calming. As a neurological response, actually, it tends to shut the listener's brain down, which simultaneously shuts the negative emotions down. In emotions, there's a little bit of a rock, paper, scissors progression. You want to get into a positive frame of mind, but it's difficult to go from angry to positive. So many times you need to go from angry to calm and then to positive.
Yeah, go back to neutral.
Yes, exactly.
Well, that's an interesting segue to one of my other questions I'd love to talk to you about. I'm very deep into mindfulness, meditation, yoga. I found personally that meditation was one of the single most impacting things that I began to add into my daily habits, and it improved a lot of things. And then, your work added on to that. But there was a foundation of mindfulness and actually just slowing down and understanding what is going on in the world and what is actually happening versus what I think is happening. So what value do you see in mindfulness meditation techniques allowing you to improve as a negotiator by potentially handling uncomfortable situations with equanimity? And then how do you go about improving them?
Oh, I think it's huge. And a lot of different people are taking that approach for different reasons, different explanations. But it's about clearing the negative clutter in your head. It's about getting more in the moment. I mean, if you're going to completely listen in a negotiation, you have to be totally in the moment. Because in a negotiation, there's more information coming off the other side that if you were completely focused and you can take in anyway. You can hear the words, but do you hear the emotion behind the words? So mindfulness is about being completely in the moment, and it's not emotionless. It's the elimination of negative emotions. And, whether or not you're doing gratitude exercises, whether you're working out, I think the mindfulness, the different meditation, the more we know about neuroscience, has a restorative and even a repair effect on a brain and a brain's capacity. So I think there's absolutely a place for it. I think it's good for you. I'm a big fan of Andrew Huberman. He talks about non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, I think is what he calls it. He sort of coined
the Yoga Nidra.
Yeah, Yoga Nidra. There's a whole bunch of things there that are restorative because you get worn out during the course of a day. Like, you got decision fatigue, you got an accumulation of negative residue, which is almost like plaque in the brain. And other than getting a good night's sleep, what kind of maintenance can you do during the day so that your brain is restored, your attitude, your psychology, your psyche? And I think mindfulness is one of those things that's very much on that list.
The Yoga Nidra is a really interesting one. I don't know if you've used it too much. Have you used it much?
I have not. I haven't, not yet. No.
Yeah, it's a good one for when, let's just say, as an example, you've got a bunch of deadlines and you can only sleep 3-4 hours a night, and you just have a bunch of shit you got to get done, but you will have these little moments of maybe 20 minutes, half an hour throughout the day, and that's the perfect time. So when I'm in a big sprint and I'm just, for whatever reason, not able to sleep enough, I will do that, because the value of it that I found was that because you're not trying to sleep, you have no goal. your body goes into a state of rest a lot quicker than if you're like, all right, I got 20 minutes. I need a nap. I need to fall asleep. This needs to happen now. And then all you do is you sit there and you go, nothing's happening.
Right.
But the benefit of this is that all you need to do is lie there and listen. And then by default, the improvements occur, and then you can kind of go back into the chaos of whatever you need to be working on.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. It's an interesting technique. So, you mentioned before, empathy is really important. I'd love to get an understanding of the difference between, empathy, tactical empathy, and potentially manipulation and negotiation, and what that line is, and how to stay on the empathetic side versus the manipulation side, and the downsides of manipulation.
Yeah, really, it's the ultimate goal. Where you're taking somebody. What's the difference between manipulation and influence? I'm trying to influence you into a more collaborative place. Manipulation is when I got to hide my objectives. Like I'm engaged in this, and if you were aware of it, you wouldn't do it, because ultimately you wouldn't want the long-term effects. And there's even I've had this discussion with people in law enforcement, because in fighting terrorism, thank God that we basically banned harsh interrogation techniques. And mostly because they're ineffective and they don't work, and they create terrorists and they create lies. And, never mind all the other reasons, they just don't work. And so then to some degree, there are interrogation techniques that are highly manipulative long-term. Like if they knew what your objective was, they wouldn't agree. And, I'm not about that either. I want to be transparent with you. I don't want my objectives to be something that I'm embarrassed to hide from you. And that's when you get into manipulation. Manipulation is, if you knew where I was trying to take you, you wouldn't go. Now, influence. I'm trying to take you into an agreement that you feel good about and that you make money. My prosperity is not at your expense. It's not a zero-sum game. And then to drop the F-bomb, you're going to feel that what you got out of it was fair in comparison to what I got out of it. Like, I may get more out of it than you, but that's not a necessary criteria for unfairness. And so, the whole fair thing is like so subjective. And it's really hard to come to unless you feel involved. And I help you see that not only are you better off, but you're much better off. And you were involved every step of the way. It was knowing every step of the way. And yeah, you and I make a deal. I plan on making money. Let's not kid each other. I don't got a problem with you making money, but I'm not in here. I'm not a charity. This isn't a philanthropy. The philanthropy includes me. And I think that's really the difference between, manipulation and influence. Manipulation is I'm trying to hide from you what I'm really doing.
Fairness, is it basically a form of framing then? So if somebody, I'm thinking of an example of, let's just say, you speak about in your book a lot about guiding somebody into potentially an outcome that you would like as well. But sometimes if you go with that too early, then it's instantly rejected. So, but if you do the same thing at the end of the day with the right pass, does that mean that the idea of fairness in a human's mind is purely just a framing thing, not an actual objective thing?
Yeah, well, then if we're making it framing synonymous with subjective, or, like I say, it's in the eye of the beholder, then fairness is almost completely subjective. Like fairness generally lacks criteria. Okay, if you say this is a fair deal, I could be like, sounds like you got some criteria to support that. Typically, it lacks criteria, like your gut instinct. It's just fair. It's fair for me, or it's unfair. Like fairness really lacks criteria, because if you had criteria, you'd have gone with it in the first place. And yet, all right. So subjectively, there's a game that drives game theorists up the wall, but it's very true. It's called the ultimatum game. It's a theoretical split of $10. And we used to run people in my negotiation courses through it all the time. It's $10 of found money. What do you, in order to get the money, you got to offer a split the other side would accept. So game theorists would say, theoretically, you should accept any split. Because if you don't accept it, you don't get anything. So theoretically, I can offer you 1 and I keep 9. And since by anybody's math, 1 is always more than 0, all you had to do was accept to be better off. But people won't do that. People are like, screw you. I ain't taking 1 if you're taking 9. I don't care if I'm better off. That's not fair. So what's the criteria that people are most likely to either offer or accept? Like if I take 6 and you keep 4, pretty good chance you're going to accept that. You didn't really like that I got more than you, but I didn't get that much more than you. And then some people, it takes 3 and 7. If you get 3, I get 7. You're not going to like that. But once you start getting below that, like 8-2 or 9-1, you're like, that's not fair. I'm not taking that. And the ultimatum game drives game theorists crazy. Like, how does this play out in real life? And I did this one time. Like, I'm teaching the ultimatum game at Georgetown on a regular basis. We got an opportunity, potentially at a contract overseas, that might be worth $8 million. And we needed an introduction for it if we were going to get it. And so the guy that could potentially place the introduction, he's like, well, what's my end? If I make this introduction, you guys get this contract. What's my end? And off the top of my head, I'm thinking like, well, finder's fee is 10%. You probably make the case for 10%. This guy goes $800,000. That would change my family's life. And I remember at the moment thinking like, all right, so it's going to take my whole team. If we run this contract, all the people I bring in, my end might be $500,000. And that just feels wrong. All you did was make an introduction. You get $800,000. I got to work my ass off for a year for $500,000. That's not fair. And I got up the next morning and I thought, when was the last time I thought making $500,000 in a year was bad? Like, what is wrong with me? Like, if you'd have come to me yesterday and said, look, I got a gig for you. It's a yearly long gig. You're going to make $500,000. I'd have been like, yeah, baby. Yeah, I'll do that. And now, because I'm all bent out of shape because this other dude's going to do less work and make more money, I'm offended. I'm going to turn this down. But that's the ultimatum game in real life. That makes no sense. It's irrational. Like I said, $500,000. Yeah, baby, I'll take that gig. So this whole fairness thing, like you got to be careful of how you react as a human being.
Mm. So what were the techniques or the process of thinking that allowed you to realize you were being irrational?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's no rationality is the same thing like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. But, what was it that caused me to wake up to, like I'm violating what I thought I believed in, like core values. Let's put a different criteria on that, if you will. I had to think it through. I had to compare it to what I'd been teaching at Georgetown in this really theoretical game we were playing called the ultimatum game, and hoping that my students got the point. And then I really needed to be slammed with it in the face in reality, and I needed to sleep on it overnight. A lot of times we as humans, we need to bake on something overnight. We have an interaction in a day, and, we might react, we might overreact, depending upon what time of day it is, depending upon a lot of stuff. And, the brain does a lot of really good work while you're sleeping. That's why historically it's been great advice to say, let me sleep on this. You can wake up in the morning with a fresh perspective, and a supercomputer that is between your ears has been running while your body was recharging. And I think in that particular instance, the fact that I had a chance to sleep on it, my brain in the background is reflecting on my core values and a context. And I wake up the next day and I'm like, what was I thinking?
Yeah. And so how important is reflection in being a good negotiator and getting effective outcomes?
Well, that's a great question. And a lot of the negotiation skills in the Black Swan method are designed to build reflection into the process. Like if you're labeling and you're mirroring, if you're exercising empathy, if you're demonstrating empathy. I think I heard Sam Harris say that empathy was a species of reason. So it's giving you the opportunity to reason, to reflect, to analyze in the moment. So I think it's critical. It's critical to do it in the moment. And then it's critical, it's essential to give yourself some opportunity to think. I'm going to continue to throw quotes out from people who've affected me. Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank, I once heard her say, here's a phrase I've never regretted. Give me some time to think about it. And when she said, here's a phrase that I've never regretted, I remember thinking at the time, like, boy, I can't wait to hear this. Like, I admire her. She's somebody I could learn from with a history of success through some very difficult times in New York real estate as a woman. Like, that's a challenge. So if she says, here's a phrase I've never regretted, like, I want to know what that phrase is. And she said, give me some time to think about it. I thought, wow, yeah, that's brilliant.
So touching on your example, your experience in, high stakes, high impact, high consequence negotiating and negotiating with terrorists and all these sort of kind of experiences you've had, how do you then make space to reflect in these situations when you're getting pushed for deadlines, when there's high emotions? What are some techniques that you've noticed that are really, really effective in really, really challenging situations?
Well, we're going to start driving in a timetable to think regardless. I used to, one thing that I never told victim families, when I was coaching them, that I was going to do, because it sounds stupid, but we're going to do anyways, we put the terrorists on a schedule. We'd schedule calls. Now, give some thought. Like, what did you just say? Did you just say you scheduled calls with the terrorists? And you'd be like, are you out of your freaking mind? Like, I could never tell a family, like, first thing we're going to do is we're going to schedule calls with these guys. They'd be like, look, they'd show me the door. They'd kick me out of their house if I told them that. But, we're scheduling the time in. We're going to figure out what the cadence is. How would we schedule time in? We've got a designated person to talk to the bad guys. And if the phone rang at an unscheduled time, somebody else would answer the phone. And they'd say, like, where's Chris? And like, Chris is out trying to get your money. Oh, okay. When's he going to be back? Well, he's going to be back at 1. All right, we'll call you at 1.
That's so good.
So, you're scheduling a cadence in. You're becoming aware of what the other side's cadence is. And then, like, you're going with it. The other side's going to have a cadence they're comfortable with. Like, give another example, working cases in the Philippines, bad guys are terrorists in the jungle. and there's one cell tower, and it's 2 mountains over. So what does that mean? When the sun rises, they're waking up. If they're in the jungle, they ain't got street lights, they ain't got lights in their house. The sun's coming up, they're ready to rock. Sun's going down, they're going to bed. There's a cadence there. So you schedule in a cadence to make it part of the process. And then what else did I do? Always negotiated as a team, always had sounding boards on my team. Like I do that today. I'm talking with my team about a negotiation we're in. We're kicking stuff back and forth. You want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go as a team. That applies to negotiations. So we're collaborative together. As a company I'm advising, we're collaborative on their negotiations. So you got to make sure you're collaborative and using people at least 4 sounding boards, not necessarily advice. Nobody needs advice. Everybody needs a sounding board.
Just quickly, though, I want to talk to you about a taboo but very important topic, sperm health. I bet you didn't think I was going there. One day I want to have kids, and like any future parent, I want to give them the best shot at a healthy life. But let's face it, we're at a war every day with our health in this modern world. Chemicals, microplastics, and artificial environments are wreaking havoc on our internal systems at every turn. And if you know me, I'm obsessed with health, and the health of my swimmers have been on my mind for a number of years. That's why we've partnered with Legacy, who are changing the game in at-home sperm testing and freezing in the US. Did you know that globally, sperm counts have dropped by 50% in the last 40 years? Let that sink in for one moment. This is not just a fertility problem as well, because low sperm quality has been linked to a high risk of testicular cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and even early death. And on top of that, your sperm quality begins to decline around age 30, and by your 40s, the risk of infertility and having a chance of a child with neurological disorder begins to go up. So testing and freezing now may be the best decision I make for my future family, and potentially you too. So Legacy makes it easy. They send a kit straight to your door. You do the business in the comfort of your own home, and in 48 hours, the results are on your phone. Plus, you can freeze your sample at 2 secure locations for peace of mind. So if you're like me and you want to be proactive with your future, as well as support the podcast, head over to givelegacy.com and use the code TOT at checkout for 10% off. That's givelegacy.com using the code TOT for 10% off. Thanks for listening. Now back to the podcast. You mentioned scheduling time in as an example of, you mentioned explaining to a family that you trying to schedule time in would be a negative in their mind. And you also mentioned that transparency is important. So how do you toe the line between transparency and giving up too much information to people around you and even to the person that you're potentially negotiating to on the other side? It's a very, very fine line, it seems.
Well, you're going to trust me on those details when, number one, I demonstrated an understanding of what you're going through. Number one.
So empathy.
It's empathy. It's calling out how the other side's feeling. And there's varying levels of calling it out. And the levels of calling it out are going to be driven by, again, your perspective. That's the definition of empathy. How do you see things? Like on a suicide hotline, I could say, you sound angry. And he'd be like, yeah, man, thanks for saying that. Because they saw me as a detached, neutral third party. Now, with a significant other, a spouse, a girlfriend, a wife, if I could say, you sound angry, they'd be like, you sound angry! Because to say that you sound angry makes me sound tentative and not sure. But somebody's had a really long relationship with you doesn't want you to be tentative. They want you to know. And so, based on their perspective, I can't say you sound angry. I got to say, I know you're angry. That's a different level. That's driven by the reaction. So, with a family in crisis, they don't want me to be tentative about how they feel. They want me to know. And I'd walk into a house and I'd say, I know you're angry. I know you feel abandoned, and I know you feel alone, because that's how they felt. And then, that's a demonstration of how they feel. Now, the next stage is from them not to know what my plan is or my strategies, but then to know that I know the landscape. And the fascinating thing about this is that is the number one critical issue why somebody in business would choose you today as a vendor. I'm constantly reading data surveys on how decisions are made in business. And as a side note, there's no data anywhere that suggests that business decisions are made any differently than any other decisions because they're humans that are involved. And human decision making does not change based on concept, whether it's business to business, whether it's B2C, whether it's personal. You make decisions a certain way because you're wired on human. So the demand gen reports that I read on business decision making, why people buy, number one reason somebody picks a vendor is the understanding of the landscape, not the understanding of the customer, and not the understanding of the plan, and not the price. Number one, landscape. So how did I do that with kidnap victim families? And I'm dealing with a kidnapping in Haiti one time. I say to the father, he literally says to me, "You're in Washington, D.C. How you going to help me?" He's in Haiti. I'm in D.C. I'm calling him on the phone. You can't imagine that some moron from D.C. is going to help him. And so I say, all right, so here's the deal. Haitian kidnappers are not killing kidnap victims these days. I realize that's really stupid because they kill each other at the drop of a hat. But for whatever reason, they're not killing kidnap victims. Now, today is Thursday. And currently, Haitian kidnappers love to party on Saturday night. So if you do as I ask and say the things I want you to say when I want you to say them, we're going to have your son out late Friday or early Saturday morning. And he said, "Tell me what you want me to do." And we had his son out Saturday morning. Now, what did I do in that brief description? I described the landscape. Because no matter what the circumstances are, if you know that I know the landscape, then you're satisfied that I'm going to have a plan to navigate that landscape. And if I've shown a demonstration of understanding of how you feel and I got a good feel for the landscape, you're like, all right, let's go. And that's why I didn't mention the middle part, like we're going to put these guys on a schedule. Because the first thought is like, do you even know what you're doing? Have you ever done this before? Do you have any understanding of the landscape? I jumped there ahead of time by laying out the landscape. And that's the issue with business. That's the issue with personal interactions. I get an approach probably, it's about 2 years ago. Never Split the Difference sells well globally in every language because it's about humans navigating each other. So it sells well in Brazil. Big market in Brazil. It's one of the world's larger economies. Very private, big private sector, big business driven. The book's doing well in Portuguese. It's selling well in Brazil. Somebody calls me on the phone and says, "Got a great, you should be training in Brazil. Your book is big here. There's a big opportunity here for you to do your coaching and training in Brazil." And so my first thought is, are they seduced by the size of the opportunity, or do they know what the hell they're talking about? So my email response is, what's the landscape look like? What do we got to do to implement? And their response was, "It's a big market here." I'm like, okay, you don't even know what I just asked you. And I didn't respond to them again because they had no understanding of the landscape. They were wasting my time.
So what would a better answer have looked like if they'd, made some success there?
Well, if they'd engaged in any sort of coaching and training already, and if I said, "What's a landscape?" any sort of answer that indicated that, we got a viable coaching and training business. We've been coaching and training here for so many years. We've impacted this many people. Start giving me some metrics of what you've done. that indicates that you've been across the ground already. And then I'm going to ask you, all right, so what are the hard parts? What are the challenges? What are the difficulties? Like if you pretend like there aren't any, you're either lying to me or you're lying to me about something, whether or not you've done it or you're just keeping the cost of implementation away from me because you're afraid of me finding out. But if you do you have any experience? And then I'm going to ask you about the challenges and pitfalls or problems.
It makes sense. An idea that passed into my mind before was it's all really about building trust at the end of the day. And you made a mention about getting a consistent cadence going. So I'm going to try and tie this together, but how do you see consistency as an important element to building trust? And are there similarities between the negotiating with, say, a terrorist versus negotiating with a spouse or in a business of just providing consistent cadence, as well as potentially even building trust with an audience as you build a business or a podcast or media brand?
Well, consistency is what builds trust. And so it's consistency. The word that I frequently use is predictability. But if you're consistent, you are predictable. And if you take out the word trust entirely and you drop in the word predictable, then that's what builds trust. Do I call when I say I'm going to call? Do you wonder about when I'm going to call? And this is probably one of the biggest problems in all business interactions, because most people only, if they're trying to get something done, they only call when there's good news or bad news. And how do you know when there's good news or bad news? Well, you don't. So that makes you inconsistent. It makes you unpredictable because the other side never knows when you're going to call. And this is a really counterintuitive thing. When we're in high stress situations, we schedule calls for updates even when there's no update. Like I'm going to say, look, you're going to hear from me Tuesday at 1, rain or shine. Now, a lot of people don't want to do that because they're going to say, like, I might not have anything good. Like, what happens if I get on the phone and I say there's nothing new? Then you've been consistent. And you've been predictable. And that's very counterintuitive because people are afraid that if I call and I say, look, I got nothing new, they're afraid it makes them look stupid. But then it's all about you. How does it make it look to the other side? The other side feels informed. The other side, in my company, it's one of the things that I got to remind people on a regular basis. Because if I text somebody about something and I don't hear back in 48 hours, I want to know what the hell's going on. And if the answer is, well, I'm still working on it. All right, so that's reassuring. You didn't forget. Number one, you didn't forget. Number two, what's the last thing you did to have contact with the other side? What was their response? You only want to report good news to me. I want to know where we are. I want to stay informed. And it's everybody has to be taught what it means to keep somebody informed, because you don't want to leave somebody in the dark. It's far more negative than people have any idea. It's far worse. Leaving somebody in the dark is worse than looking stupid.
It's an interesting point. I'm drawing some parallels into my life now that I'm going to apply this to. So thank you. That's good. I'm sure there are a lot of people that will hear that and apply that, because I've never really heard of that as a potential idea before.
That's one way to outperform your competition.
Just check in.
Understand what it really means. Understand the predictability, the consistency, how huge that is.
Yeah, for sure. Across every facet, having a partner, with your children, with your coworkers, with an audience. It's just, are you going to do what you said you're going to do? And do you keep showing up and checking off that you've thought about them and that they have, that they've put their trust in you and that you've kind of honored that in a way?
Yeah, Yeah, I'm glad that you made that so broad because it's true on every level of every human you deal with, especially with children.
So it makes me wonder, there's probably a very important consideration about not spreading too thin with your days and the things that you focus on. What do you think?
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, Dan Sullivan, strategic coach. I'm a coach. I'm a professional coach. I get coached on two levels. I get coached on my business practices through the entrepreneurial operating system, and our coach is Jonathan Smith, superstar. And then I get coached on executive thinking and behavior through strategic coach and Dan Sullivan. So you asked me about not getting spread too thin. Like Dan places a very high priority on free days. In his vernacular, there's three kind of days. There's focus days, there's buffer days, and there's free days. Focus days is when you do what he says your unique ability is. What makes you thrive, what gives you energy, and what do you uniquely bring to the team. And it's not necessarily what you're better than everybody else at, because that's when you start getting spread too thin. But what do you uniquely bring to the world? That's a focus day. Buffer day is emails, miscellaneous, to-do lists, stuff that's just got to get done. Only you can do it, but it's not unique ability. Now, free days, and this relates directly to getting spread too thin. Like Dan tries to get all of us successful entrepreneurs. A free day is when you're not working at all. You're not answering emails. You're not answering texts. You may go for a hike in the mountains. You may work out all day. You may lay by the pool and sip green tea. But you ain't working and you ain't thinking about work. And Dan is trying to get us to do 2 free days a week. Now, most of us entrepreneurs are like 2 a week. I don't do 2 a year. You want me to do 2 a week? And I go like, I know. Start putting them in. And because you have to recharge. And the more spread thin you are, the less effective you are, the more you water yourself down, the less impact that you have on your life, on your family's life, on the world's life. You're just worse. You're a C student at best, spread thin.
Well, if you want to have as much impact with the hours that you have, you need to be impactful with that time, right? So if you're just doing a lot of admin, a lot of busy work, it doesn't help. So what's the split, out of curiosity? So 2 days rest, 2 days buffer, 1 day buffer. What does it look like?
Yeah, by and large, yeah, that's a great question on the other two. I mean, ideally, if there's 2 free days, like I'd put an emphasis on focus days being 3 of the remaining 5. Your unique ability. And in point of fact, it's like working out. Like the great athletes, besides understanding the great workouts, they also understand recovery. Like your body's got to recover in order for it to be as strong as it could possibly be. Yeah. So
yeah, he sleeps 10 hours a day, and that's a consistent thing that he does, like LeBron James.
Yeah. Well, what evidence is there that he knows what he's talking about?
It's a valid point. I mean,
he's been
being one of the best in the world.
Not only is he one of the best in the NBA, but he's been there long enough for his son to be on the team with him. I mean, that's some longevity.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted to quickly pivot into the book and the work you've done in that space that has now led to, you've got a TV show, Tactical Empathy. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, we don't have a TV show yet. We're working on sort of a non-scripted show, but there is a documentary that's out called Tactical Empathy. Documentary film. It's on Amazon. It's kind of the origins, some of the pivotal FBI hostage negotiation cases that really contributed to how my thinking evolved. There's some drama in there. They're not all upside. You learn from disasters. more than you learn from successes. And documentary is doing really well. It's extremely highly rated on Amazon. It's about an hour in duration. And if you watch it and you send us an email with proof, because you got to rent it, 99 cents. I know that's an exorbitant amount. It's extremely high cost, 99 cents. You can buy it, I think, for $4, but 99 cents to rent it. And then send us an email, Tactical Empathy Documentary, that you watched it, you rented it, and we'll give you $50 credit towards any of our live online training. So we want you to watch it. We want you to get an understanding of it. We want you to enjoy it. It's also a pretty good introduction to the Black Swan method and give you food for thought if you take some of our online training.
Nice. So just to elaborate quickly on that, you mentioned Tactical Empathy Documentary. Is that at Black Swan Group? Yeah,
specifics. Send the email to info@blackswanltd.com.
Yeah, with the subject line Tactical Empathy Documentary.
Tactical Empathy Documentary.
Got it. I just wanted to make that very clear.
Thank goodness you did. I skimmed over it.
Of course. So I'm conscious of your time, and I'd like to get a few little rapid fire things, or not so much rapid fire, but just general philosophical ideas about the world before we finish up. So what's the biggest thing over the last 2 years that you've changed your mind on?
How to lead, and I'm much more into in my company. I'm making a point to mentor everybody. I want to mentor and encourage positive reinforcement. But if I've got an issue with your behavior, then I want to make it clear to you that I'm mentoring you, and the purpose of mentoring is so people get better. They're better as human beings. I'm trying to help people be better humans, and as a side benefit of that, I get a better employee.
For sure.
And
it's a good investment.
And when I'm mentoring people and I'm guiding them, my point is this is about having a better life. Yeah, I'm going to benefit too, but these, I think, are life skills. So I'm mentoring much more these days.
What makes a good mentor in your mind? Or an effective mentor, let's say?
I think that a person is just conscious of the impact of what they're saying, and they want the impact to be positive. Like very, very conscious. And then I'm going to read, ideally, I read you. And if it's hit harsh, I may need a lot of follow-up to make sure that that I want you to be in a better place. And if you've taken it in stride, then it takes less follow-up. But I got to be conscious of the impact.
I mean, especially with the accommodators, right?
Well, yeah, they analysts, it depends. Some analysts can be, can have thin skins as well. Accommodators probably have thin skins, but certainly the analysts can also.
I've noticed, because just some back history, I've been in and out of running my own businesses for the better part of 10 years now, and I was quite young when I started, 22, 23, and I really underestimated offhand comments that I would make to staff that I didn't even think of as a thing that would send them into a tailspin, and they would be ruminating and stressing and reflecting about what this meant. But in my head, it was this little blah, blah, blah. And then I moved on with my day. And it became abundantly clear that it's really important to consider how impactful your words are especially when you're in a position of power and influence. People take it and they really think about it. So have you had an example of that's been positive and negative in this process?
Well, I'm running through my mind, and I'm sure. I mean, I think, I'm making a mistake a lot less than I probably did even just a few years ago.
It's good growth.
And I'm spending a lot of time on follow-up now these days, and And the feedback I'm getting is that I haven't overdone it.
That's good.
Trying to make sure it's landed well.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, again, going back to what you said before, the consistency, just checking in, even if there's nothing to check in on.
Yeah. Good point.
How do you do that at scale?
I don't think you can. I mean, I think you could try to teach it to the people around you
Through culture.
Yeah. What are your core values? What's your culture? But it's going to get diluted down every time. So trying to do it at scale is probably a fool's errand.
Yeah. I guess you would scale through culture of the organization and systems and expectations that this is how you approach it and this is why you approach it.
Yeah.
What's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you?
Wow.
The gratitude session.
Yeah. There's been some stuff. I'm not going to get into it.
Okay. That's okay. If you could only recommend one book or experience or maybe even a podcast for somebody to read or do, and it's only one thing they can do that's going to have the most impact in their life going through, what would it be and why?
Well, I got two favorite podcasts, and it's a toss-up between the two of them for different reasons. I listen constantly to Andrew Huberman's podcast. I happen to think the world of Andrew.
He's a wonderful dude.
And he's about actionable, usable science that to make your life better at every step. Whether you're working out, whether you're with a spouse, taking care of your skin, diet. Like he's just like obsessed with actionable, usable science. And then the flip side, I love listening to Lex Friedman. Lex
I love Lex
philosophical.
As well.
I can't explain exactly how Lex is wired, but it's about the beauty of an epic journey in life.
Yeah,
he's got such an appreciation for, and the words beauty, empathy. Lex's and the amount of information. I don't know how that dude sleeps. Because he has to vacuum up so much information. I don't know. I'm listening to him. A recent interview, he's talking about a guy who's doing Neuralink with Elon Musk.
I've listened to that as well.
And I'm like, Jesus, everything this guy's talked about, Lex, you're familiar with. You read the stuff. You're commenting on it. When did you find the time?
Yeah.
So both of those guys, and then I tell you what, fascinating is if somebody's been both on Lex's podcast and Andrew's podcast.
So you.
Well, me, but there's been some other people. And, I'm not going to give you a lot of actionable science. Andrew's interview with me wasn't about actionable science.
Yeah.
I was on just mostly because Andrew's fascinated by human beings. And I think, I know Andrew respects me. I certainly respect him. But there've been the other interviews also are fascinating to listen to. Both Andrew and Lex talk to somebody.
Lex and Andrew and Stephen Bartlett, they're probably my three podcasters that I really look up to, and I model a lot of the way I communicate and how I approach a lot of this from them. So 100% agree. Yeah, they're all brilliant. I'm conscious of your time, so a couple of questions.
We're pretty darn close to the hard stop.
Yeah. So, look, is there anything that you're excited about at the moment that you want to let the listeners in on?
Well, I'm really most excited about the documentary because, the documentary is entertainment, and it helps you understand the cool nature of the Black Swan method. It's kind of cool to have this sort of. And then it also helps people if they want to take the next steps into any of our training. I mean, to be a Black Swan, to make deals that change your life. That's cool to me. I got a note that I keep on my desk that a guy handed me in an airport about the deal that changed his life. And I dig that. So the documentary film is to helping people on that journey is something I'm really excited about. Tactical Empathy on Amazon.
Nice. And where can people find you if they're interested?
Well, the easiest way to follow my Instagram is the FBI Negotiator, and I'm putting up stuff, daily tools, daily skills, ideas, philosophies, and then also occasionally now we'll tell you about some training. We'll tell you about something we have coming up, so you can pick up some stuff that you can use today on my Instagram feed, and then you become aware of training that we have coming up.
Great. And my last question is, if you could know the absolute truth to one thing, what would it be?
The absolute truth. Wow. I don't, first of all, I don't know. Secondly, if I knew it, that would stop me from going on the journey to find it out.
Or you'd go to the next level, whatever's behind that absolute truth.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you. I don't want to cut myself off from the journey of seeking the truth.
Sure. If you come up with something in your sleep once you've slept on it, send me an email. I'd love to hear.
I'll do it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for your time and energy, Chris. I really, really appreciate you coming on. It's been wonderful to chat to you. Your work has, as I said at the start of the podcast, had a really meaningful impact on my life, and I'm sure it will continue to, because I'm just getting started. So, yeah, I appreciate you. I'll let you go. Hopefully we'll do a part 2 down the line when I've turned this into a top 10 podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great. Or get somebody else from my team on. Get Derek on.
Yeah. We'll talk about it. I'll talk about it after the episode, and we'll have a chat off air.
All right. Excellent.
Nice.
Thanks,
Thank you, Chris.
Adam. Yeah,
appreciate you. And for those who have made it this far, please give this podcast a rating and let us know your thoughts in the Q&A on Spotify or comments on YouTube. I'd love to hear from you.